Did you ever get involved in the collectible card game world? If so, you were probably used to throwing away a whole lot of money. And we're going to talk a little bit about stacks of money and the sort of immersion it creates with a small I, this time on Introspective with a big I. Hello there, I'm Scott Nicholson. I'm a professor of game design, and welcome to Introspective. On each episode, what I do is I start with a spark. I start with something interesting from a specific game, and then I use that to talk about other games and game design and psychology. And my hope is that you'll become a little bit more introspective about the games that you're playing and the people that you're playing them with. Now, in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about immersion. A little bit of immersion. And my spark for that is this stack of money from Millennium Blades. Now, Millennium Blades is a game that takes a look at the world of collectible card games. It takes a meta look at what's going on about the purchasers of these games, the industry, the way these games go through in cycles, and it simulates over a couple hours several cycles, several seasons of a collectible card game. It does this through alternating between periods where you're buying and selling cards and periods where you're actually playing the game, which is a very simple game. It's more about the meta of the collection and collecting and all of that. And that's where this comes into play. Now, in the game, they could have chosen to use individual bills for money, although bills are pretty awful to handle. I tend to always like to use poker chips when possible, but I don't in this game, because instead, what you do when you set up the game is you're given these stickers and you create these bundles of money. So there's no individual bills in the game, it's all bundles of money. And during the gameplay, you're flinging around big packs of money as you're acquiring cards. And it feels, well, a lot like it feels like to play a collectible card game. You're just taking giant piles of money and throwing them at the board. And that's what happens in the game during the purchasing phase. It's all happening live, and you're just flinging stacks of money around, and at the end there's just piles of money everywhere, and it makes it a very playful and a bit of an immersion in the game that wouldn't be there if it was just single poker chips or single pieces of money. But these bundles of money make it a more immersive and a more playful experience. Now, before I continue using the word immersive, I should talk a little bit about that. So I do escape room design. And part of what we focus on escape rooms is trying to make them immersive. But what does that really mean? Well, I've thought a lot about that. And the definition I like to use is that immersion is how much you connect with the avatar that you're controlling in the game. So when I talk about an avatar in a game, what I mean is in most games, you're actually controlling some representation of yourself. So it could be in a board game, you're moving a character around the world. In a video game, you're controlling an avatar on the screen. That's where that concept comes from. In escape rooms, you are your avatar. You're moving yourself around the world and engaging with things physically. And many times in analog games, we break that barrier between a character that we're playing in the game and who we are. Now, sometimes we do that socially, and I'll talk about that on future episodes. And sometimes we do that physically. And so in Millennium Blades, we're doing that physically by throwing around big stacks of cash. And that allows the game to be a little bit more immersive. Now, other board games have added little bits in order to make their games a little bit more immersive. A game that you may have heard of, fairly recent game, is the Sheriff of Nottingham. And in this game, what you're doing is you're looking to take items across a border, and each player has a little pouch like this. You have cards. The cards can be good cards or bad cards, and you're trying to decide if you want to try to smuggle some bad cards across the border. You put the cards that you'd like to score in this pouch, and you give it to the sheriff. The sheriff then decides from all the players which pouches that they'd like to open. When they do so, it makes a little snapping noise. And that tells you, uh-oh, you're in trouble. You better hope you don't have any red cards in there, because then you've just been caught. The snapping noise, the pouch, is what makes this a little bit more immersive, the fact that you're hiding things away. Now, Sheriff of Nottingham was a re-implementation of a game called Robin Hood, which was a reimplementation of a game called Hart and der Grenze. That was a game that came out in Germany in 2006, and rather than have pouches, it had little pieces of luggage that were very cute, and it actually did quite well that year. It was nominated for the Spiel des Jahres award. But this game was produced before that, in the 1950s, Contraband, and the 70s, a mass-market US game, Smuggle, which didn't have anything in it at all. And if you go back and read the reviews for those older games, even though the gameplay was the same, they're not very positive. And it took adding this little bit of immersion, the fact that you're putting your cards in something and handing it over, that made this game magical. Now, there's other games that do that. Sagrada, for example, is a game about creating stained glass windows and uses translucent dice. So as you build up your board and those dice, you get a feeling of a stained glass window. And Botswana, which is a game, it's a stock market game, clearly, that uses all these cute little animals. And it's been implemented. This game, Reiner Knizia, basic stock market game, has come out again and again, was mass-produced in the U.S. under the name Quandry. But Botswana took it to being that you were out on a safari looking at animals, and a game came with a whole bunch of these cute little animals. And so you would use these animals as your shares. And so it actually got people to play a stock market game who didn't really even know it was a stock market game, because you don't even have to say it's a stock market game, but the reality is it's stock market. But adding these little animals added a little bit of immersion, got them a little bit excited to engage with the game. Now, I'm not going to go into games that are gimmick games. I will do an episode on gimmick games, talking about this big guy there, where the stuff you've added is the game. Instead, what I'm focused on are times in the game where you've added a little bit of something to make the game a little bit more immersive. However, you can have too much of a good thing. And I'm looking at you, Kickstarter. Kickstarter has created this hype-based situation where companies are rewarded for getting more people backing, getting more people excited, using addictive concepts like stretch goals to try and get them to more and more and get their friends involved. And they're doing this by adding more of these little things to the game, but then the result is that you're getting these giant board games that just take up half a bookshelf, and they don't necessarily offer any more gameplay than a lot of other games. Now, there are exceptions to that, but I watch these Kickstarter campaigns that just spiral out of control, and there's so much in the box. And the problem with that is kind of like eating at a buffet. When you go to eat at a buffet, even if there's a good dish on the buffet, that dish is not going to taste as good to you as if it were served alone. And part of that's because of how we like to get pleasure. So in our brain, we've got little receptors that have things that make them happy and say, thank you, I'm happy now. The problem is those receptors, once they get something, they're kind of full and they can't take more stuff. So when you eat at a buffet, those first few bites taste really good. Your tasting receptors are all like, hey, good food, we like this stuff. But then you move on and you're eating more and you're eating more. You're really not enjoying it nearly as much as you did at the beginning, because all of your receptors that normally like the happy brain chemicals are full. They need a break. And the same thing happens with board games. These games that take one element and tweak it and make it a little bit more immersive and a little bit more playful can be appreciated more than a game that has taken every single element in the game and turned it into something that's bigger and turned it into something more grandiose, and then you just get overwhelmed. So the lesson I'd like you to take from today's discussion is that if you are making a game, take a look at the elements and the activities in the game and see if you could take one thing and add a little bit to it to make it more immersive, to make it more playful, to help the players get into their role, to engage more with who they are supposed to be in the game. And focus on making that one thing good, rather than trying to just create the fire hose of components where you're going to fill up a giant box with all sorts of stuff. Because a little bit can go a long way. And now I've gone a long way, so I'm going to let you go. Next time, I'm going to talk a little bit about this blurry card and how it helps you to see inside the mind of someone else. Go out there and be introspective. Bye-bye. A good example is the game that started as... Oh, God, all of the names are gone. Poof! As soon as I push the record button, I don't remember the names of the games that I'm going to talk about, and they're all gone. So now I got to go look them up. Be right back. Very popular. They didn't do well, and I've forgotten the names again. I just shake my head and the names just go away. I want to say Swoggle and Boondoggle, but it certainly ain't that. Oh my gosh. What's it called? Haggle? No, it's not Haggle. I just looked it up.